So there are many ways that we can classify failure, but in this section we're going to take a high-level view of it, and we're going to take it along in conjunction with your Latino text. According to Latino, failures can be classified as sporadic or chronic. Latino defines sporadic failures with those things that we would normally associate with an accident or an incident. They happen rarely, they require lots of attention, and generally they cost lots of money, especially if lives and or property are lost or damaged. Those are sporadic failures. Chronic failures, on the other hand, might be a new concept to us, but the understanding of this chronic failure concept is crucial to baseline understanding of root cause analysis. So here we go. Chronic failures are things that we've grown accustomed to. Chronic failures could be considered the cost of doing business. These are the everyday little inefficiencies that take away from the job at hand. They reduce production capabilities, generally require employee involvement to fix the minor problems. It increases labor time, labor cost, and over time, chronic failures generate very high cost. So imagine a maintenance shop that does not have sound inspection procedures. Aircraft are maintained and go out the door to the customer when the customer recognizes that the aircraft has not been cleaned properly or properly buttoned up. The aircraft needs to return to the shop for that final touch-up. Imagine that happened repetitively. How much additional cost would that generate for the company? Maybe minor cost per incident, but with repetitive incidents over time, they become very costly. Your Latino text, pages 47 through 49, actually gives some very good quantitative data as examples of chronic failures. I wanted to talk briefly about a concept called normalization of deviance. Normalization of deviance is an interesting phrase because it's an oxymoron. The root word of normalization, normal, means the usual, standard, typical, or the customary. The root word of deviation means to stray, to diverge, to digress, and differ. The phrase normalization of deviance, then, means to digress from the standard. That can apply in business as well as our personal lives, and the divergence, if we're not careful, can be so slow that sometimes it's not even noticeable until one day you look back and see how far from the standard you've come. Here are some biblical examples to help support our rationale. In Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, Jesus brings several of the 10 Commandments right down to reality. You've heard it said, don't murder. But I say, anyone angry with his brother or sister is subject to judgment. As we become angry, unjustly angry, we begin to diverge from the standard. As we become accustomed to that emotion, it becomes normal for us. Before we know it, we can become angry and contentious with our loved ones out of habit. It's habitual anger. It becomes a normalization of deviance. The same is true with lust. Lust, the second glance, the third glance, before we know it, leading to adultery. Other things seem minor: bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, etc. If we allow sin to get a foothold, we may not even recognize the gradual slippery slope down which we slide. The deviance becomes normal. As humans, we cannot live up to these expectations. We will stumble and we will fall. That was a big part of Christ's perception on the Sermon on the Mount that he was trying to communicate to us. God knew that we would stumble and we would fall, and God loved us so much that he provided the way for us. That is through Christ, so that we would not have to be perfect. Through Christ we can have eternal life in spite of our sin. Out of gratefulness then for God's provision, for what Christ did on the cross, out of our gratefulness for God's provision of eternal life, that should spur us on to try to live a life pleasing to him. With his help, we can recognize when we begin to diverge from the standard. Don't accept deviance as normal. Normalize Christ-likeness. Get right with God and with anyone you've wronged. Get back to normal. And watch for deviance of the heart. Don't let the devil get a foothold. So now that we have a clear picture of chronic and sporadic failures, as well as the problems with each, let's push that one step further and discuss the difference between problems and opportunities. I hope this next 2 slides really challenge your paradigm. Problem solving is reactive. Something fails. We have the status quo as the line in the middle. Something fails, we find it, we fix it, we bring it back up to normal, and we proceed on with the status quo. Nothing is improved. Status quo is restored. When chronic, repetitive failures occur, the deviation is not quite so much per instance, but it is repetitive, remember. Chronic is repetitive. We fix the problem, and we restore the system again, back to the status quo, until the failure occurs again, and then we fix it again. Conversely, here's the paradigm shift. Opportunities. Opportunities, on the other hand, is proactive. Opportunities is a proactive way of solving problems. If we root out chronic failures, figure out and solve those root causes, we can begin reducing or eliminating chronic failures and thus improving and enhancing the status quo and bettering our operation. So instead of the chronic failures deviating below the status quo, we look back, we see that that has happened, we perform root cause analyses to find and fix the actual root causes of these chronic failures, and then as a result, the actual status quo line starts raising. We increase performance, we progress. We get better. We better our operation, we better our safety, and we better our efficiency. In the next segment, we're going to talk about investigation types and techniques. We're going to go into some of those details. I think you'll find it very interesting. So stay tuned.